Welcome everyone to another episode of Notes from the Aleph. An Aleph is a high point from which all other things are visible, and from our vantage point we'll be looking at tabletop role-playing games, their design, and the theory behind those designs. Around here our motto is to be fair, build up, and have fun. I'm your host, GriffinVarro, joined by our editor Theta, our local designer Norman Rafferty, and our good friends and GMs RedRabbit and Lesson Learned. When it comes to tabletop role-playing games, I have 15 years of experience writing, playing, and frequently fixing problematic rule sets at the table. Pronouns are he, him, they, them. Red, why don't you go first?
Hi, RedRabbit, he, him. I am a GM running our Ironclaw game currently here on the channel. I also like to dabble in a number of other weird and esoteric RPGs as kind of an experimental online game master. I consider myself a student of both narrative and game design, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, lessons.
Yes, I go by Lessons Learned 1 here on Twitch and Lessons Learned over YouTube. I also have a book over Amazon.com called Night and Start. So it's a short collection of speculative fiction, science fiction, a little bit of horror and fantasy. And I run a game every Sunday here, Into the Wild Coast, a Greyhawk 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons adventure.
And Rafferty.
Hello world, I'm Norman Rafferty, he, him, and yes, I work for Sanguine Games, where we make fun stuff.
All right, so today's topic. So, everybody, I have 2 spells prepared today. The first is Fireball. If I cast it in a room, it does 5d6 damage in 20-foot radius. It's very direct, it's very clear, the target gets a save, and they take damage. Its boundaries are immediate and finite. Second spell I have prepared today is Major Image. I can create an illusion that fills up to 36 squares, simulates the sound, smell, and even heat of the thing I want to create. It lasts for as long as I don't get hit in the face, and the target only gets to save to disbelieve it if they walk up and interact with it. I could create anything from a pit to a dragon. The boundaries are limited purely by my imagination, but these 2 spells are the same level. Comparing these 2 directly is nigh impossible. They are incomparable. But yet, in designing role-playing games, we have to somehow find a point where these 2 spells are equal as a choice for the players. So today, we'll be talking about balancing the narrative and mechanical effects of powers in game design. So who'd like to take a stab at that first?
Can I ask you, in your example, first of all, there, Griff, were you implying that the illusion spell is way more powerful through context? Because in my experience, and when we were talking about this as a subject, I feel personally like mostly illusions and these kind of like ribbon abilities that require interpretation by a GM are considered way less powerful than the hard math spells such as a fireball or a combat spell.
That's one perspective to take. I would take the opposite, that the imagination is more. I could create a chasm that nobody wants to interact with it, and because they don't interact with it, they never figure out it's a spell.
I personally would love that too. I just, in my experience, like I would love to play an illusionist wizard. I haven't met anyone else who would. Maybe you're the other person. Maybe you're my illusionist wizard buddy.
Maybe I am. Rafferty?
Well, see, I want to build on that because there's basically 2 perspectives from this. We just did our whole session on Session 0, Figure Out Your House Rules. There are there's the, I like to call them the informal and the formal, or there's the soft and there's the hard. You know, there's the fluff and the crunchy. In some campaigns, illusions are worthless because they don't do anything. Like Red just said, it's like, well, it doesn't say it stops me. It doesn't do any actual damage. So how could the spell actually have any effect on anything in the game? Because that's what Red's experience has been. There's also the games where it's a problem solver because it's so vaguely defined up to the game master that it does everything. Like, for example, I could get the king to capitulate to all of my demands because I brought the Queen of France with me. It's an illusion. As long as the king never disbelieves it, I have the Queen of France with me in all her regalia. She speaks exactly like the Queen of France and fools him completely. because he has no reason to disbelieve it. And since the text doesn't say that, we get away with all of this. I know some of you in the text probably are chafing at this, but it's like, this is the kind of experience you run into with like the way that's written. It's like some people play an incredibly formalized game where if it's written with only precise numbers, which is one of Rafferty's complaints, only combat matters.
Mm-hmm.
The illusion spells don't do anything because they're not combat.
And I think the thing to point out here is that you don't have a Queen of France spell, and then a Pit spell, and then a Dragon spell. All of that is the same. You create an illusion. All in one.
And every wizard everywhere at 5th level or above can cast it. Mm-hmm. Which is, but that gets into a bigger problem of that D&D is just terrible.
The D&D haters podcasts.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like, there you have to look at a game funny when there's an E7 movement or E6. I found out too, where people are saying we have to stop at like 6th level because the game is no fun past 6th level, and like it makes me want to sit down and ask a question: why is 2/3 of our content useless? What happened?
Well,
I think that's something about a future podcast when we talk about self-defeating mechanics.
It is relevant to game design. I mean, we could beat on other games like the World of Darkness games have a problem where not only do you have the problem of balancing mage characters to work, but for some reason mages exist in the same world as vampires.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's no balancing those like as they're presented. One is a literal character who has cosmic forces of their imagination in their control, and the other one is a dude who's a little not fond of being out during the day.
And God forbid you made the mistake of playing a werewolf.
Well, so I think this raises a very interesting point, because I think it in a lot of ways comes down to perspective, because the rules for like a creationist mind wizard are probably kind of loose, in the same way that your illusion spell gives you a lot of free creative reign. And in some people's hands, that could be incredibly powerful and could be incredibly useless in other people's hands. And it kind of would also come down to, well, do you think vampires are cooler than wizards? If you think wizards are cooler, you're going to find ways to make them much more useful depending on how your game is run.
I think we have to go. Sorry about that.
Okay.
We have to go to what is the core of the experience, right? I think that's it. That's what we're discussing here, because supposedly, I've sort of heard in the grapevine that Gary Gygax himself hated wizards, right? Because
a little bit.
But we also know that all his most important characters that he created were all wizards.
No, Gord the Rogue is not.
Wait, that was
he famously claimed he tried to prevent TSR from going bankrupt. If only he could have written more Gord the Rogue novels faster.
Yeah,
which is hilarious because none of you have any idea what I'm talking about.
No, I read them. I know the whole that wasn't.
I'm being silly.
But when it came to the books, the characters that he's famous for, Mordekainen and all those characters, they're all mages, and of course, very powerful mages. So,
pointedly, players from his game.
Yeah, they were his. I mean, come on. One of the things is that you can think that Fireball has very specific rules because wargaming to tactical gameplay, it flows from the I want to do damage with a sword, with a this and that. And then illusions is what I would call a rule graph. It's like, well, we're imitating these wizards from the Dead World series, I think it was, or other things, the Vantian magic, and they can do all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So we got to have this illusion spell, so we're going to put it there.
Right, and I always want to cut people off by saying that, like, that's not. Yeah, people say Vantian magic. That's not what Vantian magic was.
No, it was
technological.
Hatcher did Alphabet and made their own thing.
Yeah,
would be the accurate description.
I think. Okay, so there's a trope that got codified called "a wizard did it," and it's from an episode of The Simpsons where Lucy's up there trying to. People are asking her questions about things that happened on the Xena show, like, why was your horse white in one scene and brown in the next? and she would just say, "Oh, a wizard did it." And this became codified as like one of the problems. See, Dungeons and Dragons is a game that people play for fun, and it's written by people who are not writing video games or movies or anything else that would be held to a certain standard of quality. So think about how angry you are at, like, Harry Potter or the Eternals or whatever, and realize that tabletop games are a level below that. And so a lot of these games were written by people to just have fun with their friends off the cuff ideas, whatever they thought was cool. It wasn't play tested, or it was just stuff they made up that day. And it sounded really cool. They put it in a book, and here we are 30 or 40 years later. And because we've been repeating it over and over and over again, it's got to stay that way because now it's tradition. So what we're really forgetting is when they said that in the show, they were making fun of bad writing. And the big problem that plagues stuff, because most people assume gaming equals D&D, that this stuff was wishy-washy to begin with. It wasn't designed to be balanced. And getting away from fantasy magic, these games were also roguelike. Like, I can't emphasize enough that in original D&D, you did not choose how your character leveled up. That was not a choice. You rolled dice. Maybe you got a wizard. When you got a wizard, the only way to get new spells was to find them, and that was random. And then when they did show up, there was a random chance for you to even learn it. So you didn't get minor image unless it showed up. If it never shows up in the game, you don't get it. It's not until D&D 3rd edition that they added you get spells. You get to choose some of your spells when you level up. Does D&D 5 even have finding spells in spellbooks anymore? I don't think it does.
You can still transfer spells. Yeah.
I don't know if anyone does it, but yes, that's how it's supposed to work.
Right, and this also gets the question: everyone does it. So stuff that was a problem in D&D, like some spells being better. Like, I recently, went back to D&D 1, and somebody had me generate my wizard randomly, and the only spell I started with was Enlarge.
Yeah, we did it a few times with Master, and it's horrible. Yeah, and these random spells you could literally show up with a wizard who your starting spell was Jump or Enlarge, and you literally have nothing to do in a combat. You are literally the crappiest person there. Exactly.
And that was and that was fun. And so, in theory, that was the idea of kept those game balanced. And Lessons already pointed this out. The reason why all the major characters are wizards is because they either randomly lucked into stuff or just gave it to themselves. Like, I'm always complaining about Elminster, because Elminster has all of these powers that there was no way to get them in D&D. Because he was both GM and PC, he just gave themselves to him.
He just found it, I swear.
I'm boning the goddess of magic that makes me immortal and double hit
Data
points.
goddess, you get perks. It's nepotism.
And that was something that was written much later to justify all the stuff that happened. Because really,
Elminster's first edition.
Yeah, no, but the Mystara thing, that he was the son of one, and then married another one. That was something.
He was immortal from first incarnation.
Yeah,
pages in the pages. So
yeah, he was. He was pretty powerful back then, though, with psionic powers too, by the way.
So I think,
of course. So there was the issue of random entitlement, the idea that if it randomly happened to you, we'll get away from the Santa Claus DM. If it randomly happened to you, then you've got it. So you might luck out. It's Binding of Isaac for you young people out there, where sometimes you just get you get the awesome drops immediately. And, you've already got the heat-seeking teardrop rapid fire immediately. And sometimes you've got crappy drops and your game is going to end early. It's like that just happened. And so that was their balancing thing. And as D&D grew, the books grew wider, you also ran into this problem where, like we said also, where the stuff is so soft. It's like they're not written with that in mind, which is why I think you get a lot if you start poking at Mage. The World of Darkness Mage game was, okay, we want everybody to be super powered wizards, but if we don't set some ground rules at the beginning, then this game is going to be a horrible, unplayable mess. And so they had to go through and codify a little bit more. I think one of the huge problems that you're running into with this play balance thing is Dungeons and Dragons does not have specialties. Yes, they have specialist wizard. A specialist defined as a wizard only cast 90% of all existing spells. It's like, it's not just that any wizard can do it's not just minor image exists. Every wizard can do minor image.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably like a good point of balance. If everyone is assigned these things randomly, and they happen to get something more powerful, well, that's the gamble you took. That's the reason you gamble. You hope for the payday. I'd like to draw attention to where the player has the choice between a bunch of things and then has to choose. And I like Vampire Requiem 2nd Edition because it has a whole list of incomparable powers that your players have to choose from. You can't really determine the value between Nightmare, where you make people afraid and can like cover them with illusions, versus dominating someone and giving them a single sentence to do. You don't have like a real way to compare those outside of like circumstantial things. You have to kind of decide. But I think it did a good job of putting all of these on parity, where you're not really making a bad decision. You're not gambling. Whatever you choose, it's going to be good. And it's going to be good in the situations you're probably primed to go use them in.
Well, I need to reinforce here. When I said gambling, I meant your powers were randomly assigned.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I had to bring up the old Canard of 4th edition. Because 4th edition decided everybody gets powers, and all the powers has very specific numbers, right? If you do an illusion,
1 weapon, 2 weapon, 3
an
weapon
illusion will
damage.
not simply build a bridge. It will charm somebody or stun them or make control them or something like that, right?
Well, pointedly, and they got rid of a lot. They codified a lot of those, like power them down. They brought them all back in 5th edition.
Yeah.
But like the reading he's giving us of minor image is 5th edition's reading.
Exactly. So what's that? That's what happened with 4th edition. When they tried to solve the problem was everybody gets powers. This is exactly what they do, all these conditions and all that. And anything that's extra, we're going to put it in you have to spend an hour to do this thing, and nobody should attack you while you're trying to get to do this thing. And this very simplified list of spells, utility spells. In fact, they went like combat utility, right? If it doesn't do immediate damage or it doesn't do an effect on combat, it's going to be relegated over there. The thing with Major Illusion, it can bridge the gap. It can be a utility spell, but it can also be a combat spell, because if you fool somebody with dragon to start, rambling, people are going to run away, right? Unless they're stupidly brave and they're like, I can kill the dragon, and then and even then you get a distraction. Well, they fix with the dragon, so you can hit them. Your rogue can go back and stab them or something like that. So I think that's the thing. It's like it's wishy-washy. It can be, like I said before, it can be extremely useful or totally useless, depending on the type of game that you're.
Well, I think also what we're discussing is how it undermines the game. Dungeons and Dragons 1st edition does not have a skill system. It's if you want to get something done, you can, I guess, be a thief and have random percentages. But also, a lot of it would be talking your way through stuff. There's no diplomacy. There's reaction system. But it's a lot of it was diplomacy and talking your way through stuff. You have to climb a gorge or whatever. It might be a flat roll based on your stats, or it might not be. There weren't skills that you picked, one for the other. And if you wanted to do something that was spectacular, maybe you might randomly find a spell that could do it. But you had to go through all this effort of transcribing it for several pounds of gold and then passing a random test that you might not even test to even get it in there. And you might have had to buy it in the first place, because you had to buy the scroll in the first place. So there was a lot of effort to getting all of this stuff. Now, in a modern game, you have the problem of skills, as in they exist. If you have skills, then you're telling people you need to take, some of this as opposed to that. Do you take athletics or do you take persuasion? And you have to answer this gets into my always complaint is like, well, if I'm gaming with red, if I pass, I'll know that red is more of a formal gamer. And I know that I want to take the athletic skill because if you ask me, make an athletics test or you fall off the bridge, that's an easy pass fail that we won't be arguing about. If I rolled the 7 and don't pass, I fall off the freaking bridge. So that's a formal thing. Whereas if I have to make a persuasion test, it's like, but we have wizards. They can just charm people or illusion people or talk their way through it. That's a soft, nebulous area. So, we can just solve that with magic. Because, if anyone opposes us, we can just charm them or illusion them or something like that. There's a spell that fixes that. So obviously I need to invest only in formal things like hit points and numbers that are inarguable. And if I have to do anything else that's soft, I can memorize a vague spell that will solve all the problems. This was a bigger problem in, say, Shadowrun, where early editions of Shadowrun, the shaman powers were just so vaguely worded they could do anything.
Right.
Or nothing.
Why would you not be a shaman kind of circumstance?
Depending on your GM.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think the reason that I feel this problem tips in favor of the fireball user is that it really does come down to, at least in the games that I've played, it often comes down to the uncertainty factor. Like exactly what Rafferty was just saying. If you have to gamble in this game, you'd probably rather gamble on a system that is clearly defined. You know how many dice you're rolling, you know what you need to hit and how much damage it's going to do, versus an illusion that it really comes down to how your game master interprets the situation. I also think it doesn't help that a lot of these illusions are kind of pass-fail. Like an illusion is completely effective up until the moment that it's broken, at which point it is completely ineffective. There's very little... in the rules as written, there's very little middle ground there. There's not like a lot of ways to walk that one off and still have a chance of getting out of the encounter in a clever way.
I remember second edition that there was an entire rule set of like, you go around constantly saying, I disbelieve in order to get your save. And that was definitely a horrendous way to handle it.
That is very funny, right?
Until you say you disbelieve it, it's as real to you as possible.
And I mean, like our crew, like we're the negative nabobs. Welcome everybody. Because like I've already complained in the past about magic being powerful except when it matters. Like one of my favorite hated adventures, The Lost Caverns Fudge Camp, where there's so many spells like knock and dig and pass wall and dimension door that are all devoted to teleporting. By the way, the inner sanctum has 6 doors that are all specifically teleport proof. And it's like no explanation, they're teleport proof. The only way to know that they're teleport proof is to try and teleport through them, and it just fails. And they list all the ways it would fail. So now we're in we're in this weird nebulous range of magic is incredibly powerful, but you're also allowed to just punch players in the face when they actually want to use it to solve a problem. So in which case, but that's why we're the negative nabobs, because we would all invest in Fireball because we're veterans of gaming. We would know that that's the plot-proof door. Nothing works on that. Better have Fireballs because that does work on troglodytes.
Right, it's your guaranteed choice. If you get it, you know what it'll do. No one's going to argue with it over it.
Which is the paradox. It's like magic. Like I've had people tell me I want to play a high like we enjoy high magic games like Dungeons and Dragons, but in my experience, magic doesn't do anything if the story or the plot doesn't want it to do anything. So I don't understand how that's high magic. It doesn't actually. If you can't solve a problem or a plot issue using magic, how is it? I guess you could call it high because it sounds powerful, but if it doesn't do anything, who cares?
I think the social criteria around that is that high is the assumption that a lot of people have magic, and magic is supposed to be happening in the world, so it's likelier you come across it. I think that's what the normal perspective people take on that when they say it.
Right, and that gets into
true.
And that gets into the Eberron paradox, or the thing I was complaining about that, which is if magic is commonplace and freely available, then your world would change to meet that. Eberron having its trains, despite the fact that teleportation technology is cheaper.
Are you implying that Eberron is not a very well thought out setting because
Not implying,
I
I'm
agree.
outright saying it.
Yeah.
That's
No,
why
it's-
I'm only playing the
That's-
Tippyverse.
Yeah, but
Well,
that gets me to the something I was trying to say earlier. Sorry, is that you get to a point, and although we talk about balance originally, you do get to a point where if you accept, the wider, fluffier situation, that the spells defeat the core assumptions of the game, right?
Mhm.
If you can teleport, then why walk? If
Well,
you can, if you can know the entire history of an object, and why have a mystery around what the object is, right?
Oh my
Right.
God,
It
Legend
goes
Lore.
back around to bad design. Someone wrote a thing that obviates an entire section of the game that was meant to be played.
And a lot of high level meaning around anywhere between level 9 to northward of that. You start the first paragraph for the GM section says, this spell doesn't work. This spell doesn't. Usually it's no teleportation, no summoning of creatures. You cannot revive a character unless you or you cannot use a healing spell of a lower level or something like that, right? All the toys that you're supposed to have, the designer said, I have to deliberately take them away from you because otherwise you just go to where the skull is, laugh at it because you're not stupid enough to pick it up, get what you want, and leave.
Yeah, and I want to do my sidebar comment. You said high level and then 9. 9 is below the midpoint. It goes up to 20.
But the spells,
right? But people defining that. Well, I mean, this gets back to I mean, I wrote down the quote here: "Everything is possible, nothing is interesting." This also gets back to a wizard did it, because this is where my fatigue sets in, where it's like, if magic can do anything in the setting, okay, then I'm not going to spend any time trying to figure anything out, because I've got my known unknowns, which is, well, they could have mind control people, they could illusion, they could pass wall, gaseous form, they could have done all this stuff I know about that exists. And then you've got the added problem that since it's Dungeons and Dragons, magic just does whatever anyone wants. Then you've got your unknown unknowns where it just happened because of wizardry. And that's where you get into what I've been complaining about, where these games have contempt for the players, where they assume that you've given up trying to figure anything out, or puzzle and everything, or try to do any side, like spells that could break this. We're just going to ignore all the islands in the way there and take you to the destination, because the only thing that matters is the fight. Because you're not getting around it, you're not circumventing it, you're not gonna do any magic that changes any of this. The only thing that matters is the fight. And that to me is depressing way to look at it. That like that magic can be so powerful that it on paper it does all of these things, but in practice we've also nerfed it to make sure everything is still going the way it's supposed to anyway.
Also, I wanna go back to the original point that Griffin was saying. So balancing. I think the way this is thought of is like these spells have been essentially individual trees, right? If you're thinking about battle damage, the tree of magic missile to fireball, lightning ball to disintegration is one thing, and the illusion tree is maybe a sound, create a sound to you can become invisible to create mirror image. But these lists, although they're put in the same book, they're not part of the same list. They're completely separate from each other. There's no real balance other than, I guess we're going to put this in level 5th because, we put this other spell at level 3 and therefore we need a
We're going to put this spell at level 3 because it's the third spell we thought of.
Exactly. It has nothing to do whether or not there's an actual correlation between an illusion spell and a damage spell. Yeah.
It's not like, say, a mage game where you'd rank spells from 1 to 5, and 1 are the weakest, and 5 are the blow up the building, or fool the entire crowd. Summon illusions of Godzilla images or whatever. It's like they haven't ranked them that way, because that's another. It's the weird specialty. I do want to bring up one of my bugaboos, which is when games completely underrate stuff. World of Darkness is incredibly guilty of this, which is mind control. I have seen a lot of games that for some reason make mind control cheap and easy, which is like frightening at some levels. Like especially D&D 5th edition brought back Charm Person for some reason.
But I would say that Charm Person in 5th edition actually does one thing they didn't do before. It's that they actually tell you, sure, you can charm this person. This person is going to remember that you charmed them, and they're not going to like it.
Well, that was implied in third, and
but now they put it in the hard rule, meaning that essentially you're turning an enemy.
That's not a balancing mechanism, because I could stop a fight. Like, there's no spell in first edition, or for first level, that kills someone instantly. But if I charm someone, they're neutralized for the rest of the fight, because it just ends the fight right there. Because they failed one roll, they're done. And not only are they not dead, they're my friend for the next hour or so, which is way better than killing them. Or
the sleep spell, which is another type of illusion spell, which is like that's the most powerful spell at first level to third level, because most enemies will just go down. Five goblins show up, sleep, fight's over.
Well, right. Well, it's an AoE that, but I'm just pointing out like that. Also, Charm Person is the first level version. There's more crazier ones. It was another thing that I know none of you have played this. None of you have played Aberrant, right?
Yes, I have.
Oh, you have played Aberrant? Yeah, Aberrant is the one where they make
one session.
They make super strength incredibly expensive, like to the point where you can start rivaling guns damage, or you could just buy mega manipulation, which instantly allowed you to instantly seduce or mind control people instantly. It was ridiculously cheap. And it was because the designers took this out because I think this is usually see this with White Wolf designers, is because they were so worried about the formal power of stuff. They were so annoyed. You see this in a few games where they were so worried about fireballs and that stuff deadly that they took those down because they knew those would be deadly. But mind control was so fuzzy and manipulative that they would just ignore that, despite the fact that I could show up at the table and I can defeat the Hulk because I have mega manipulation at level 3. I can just, and he's an idiot. So I can just, boom, fight's over. I told him to stop and he did. And that's way more powerful than killing him, because not only have I stopped him, he's my friend.
Yeah. Right. There's a massive amount of utility within that power just because of the way you could deploy it and cause narrative effects.
I mean, even if he hates me afterwards, I'd like to point out that I could, before the spell wears off, backstab them. And
you could sit again.
They would still hate me for doing it.
What if you prepared it 3 times today?
I think when you bring Aberrant is supposed to be a superhero type of game. Many superhero games have this problem. There is, throw lasers, whatever, and then there's time magic, which I could do all that. And I remember in DC Heroes, my favorite power was telekinesis. Why? I could fly with it. It's just one power, so it was cheap, relatively. I could fly with it, I could attack with it, I could defend myself with it. And if the Hulk showed up, only thing I had to do was lift him up 5 inches of the ground.
Right, and this is where we're running into a problem where the magic that we're running into, oddly enough, is still simulationist. Mm-hmm. It's still written in such a way to be describing very precisely 35 squares, illusions, 50 pounds of soft goods. It's written in a specific way. Instead of what you're seeing in some of the other games, not so much Mage. Wicked Ones was like this, though.
Right, Wicked Ones would have a power like, you get an item.
Well,
you get 50 pounds of groceries and you can assemble it.
Right, but more like what I'm getting at is plot-solving ways. It's instead of looking at it of this magic does this specific thing that does something, moving more towards this magic is powerful enough to solve a problem of this magnitude. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying this is minor image, which can generate the Queen of France, a vast cavern, a raging fire that would make you flee the building, or opulent wealth that I could fool you into making a transaction with. Instead of the spell doing all of that, and all of those are rated the same. The fire that fools the goblins, maybe they have a different saving throw number, but it's if they disbelieve, if you're even using that. Instead, wording it the other way, which is, getting the king to believe I have the Queen of France with me would be a higher tier level than convincing the goblin I brought 12 soldiers with me. Like the goblin's a lower level problem. So in theory, minor illusions should be able to fool the goblins, but not be able to fool, the king. This is where you see this in like stories like the big first example that comes to my mind is Star Wars, where any character they can only use their Jedi mind tricks on low level people. Even mid level people like merchants and say your Jedi mind tricks won't work on me. And we're not surprised by that. We're not surprised it doesn't work on Watto, the random guy on Tatooine or whatever. It's like, no, it doesn't work on me because I'm not a low-level peon. And that's where you get better game balance, because you don't see, the Jedi characters or whatever mind controlling everyone they meet. They don't solve the Count Dooku problem by mind controlling it. It's their supernatural powers are worded, and that's where we're running into that's where you run into the problem with D&D. D&D is worded with these are the degrees of spells, and these are the effects they have. And if you can pull that roll off, you get everything you wanted today. Or in the case of some spells, it's not even worded that way. It's you teleport through the door. It's not Dimension Door doesn't say it goes through anything except it goes through moderate level. I guess maybe it does. Does it have like a long description? I don't know. It's a theory.
No, it's a range. It's a range.
But it makes you go through the ethereal plane. So if the door also exists in the ethereal plane, whatever that means. Moving on. What I'm getting at is they haven't worded the magic in the way of these are the power levels and these are the problems they solve. They've worded them in like whatever came to us that day and whatever they were thinking. And that's why like legend lore is like, or those commune spells, those information gathering spells in D&D are so broken because they didn't know how to word them. I can ask any yes or no question with an augury spell and get an answer, and it doesn't matter what it is or there's no gradation of this. There's no like comparison to solving the plot, and that's why the game starts to fall apart, because by the time you get to level 5 or 7 or whatever, you've accumulated so many of these, and they solve any problem.
Or they don't put extra conditions like, okay, yes, you can commune with this higher power, but they're a higher power. They're going to ask for something in return, right? You simply just sit there and go like, some of them do, but most of them don't. It's like you're a level cleric. You're supposed to be pals with your god, right? You should be able to, to call a solar and go like, hey, can we have a drink? Like, sure, why not, right? That's the thing. Like, for example, a good fix for, say, very common, at least for me, has been for, bringing people back from the dead is like, okay, sure, I'll bring you back from the dead, but you have a geas, right? You have to do this, or less you're gonna a certain amount of time, or you're just gonna go back to being dead, right? Because I'm altering. You're supposed to be dead. You're a mortal creature, and you're supposed to just die, and this was your time. If you want to get out of that, you owe me. So I think that would be a better.
That would be an interesting way to balance it. But of course, that spell exists, and then another spell exists where you get it, and there is nothing. And so that's bad design. And that's what we kind of end up seeing a lot right now.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the limitations there are... the other big limitation to the divining spells are you get like a one-word answer. So, you'll get like a wheel or a woe, or wheel and woe, which is completely useless. Which if you're a GM and you ever deliver wheel and woe, you can expect that your player is never going to use that spell again. So like, it's tricky. The other problem... I think the big problem is in the way that these things are structured. The games that D&D provides you to play do not give you... They're not structured in a way to deal with that kind of power level. Like, if you present someone a mystery and the tools to solve that mystery with a single power use, then that adventure is pointless. I mean, that's something that I know Rafferty has bashed a lot in terms of like the adventure design in D&D lately.
It's always been a problem. Like I mentioned earlier, that, a lot of these spells were like, no, you can't do this anymore. And Rafferty says the same thing, because otherwise, you just go there, right? Just
yeah. I'll also say that as someone who's writing this stuff, it's exhausting to have to outthink every power that your players might have, especially at higher power levels, because you don't want to be the guy who's sitting there and realizing, oh, they just solved this entire arc with one power that I forgot about. And so instead you do this stupid thing, which is like, oh yeah, you can't see through the cloud of existential fog that I have created because I need it, because it's the only way we keep this adventure interesting.
See, and speaking as a designer, this is what really pisses me off, because like people will ask, like look at our games like Ironclaw and ask, why aren't there these high magic spells? And my answer is, for what we've just been talking about, because they don't work. Because if I let you buy X-ray vision as a spell, I'll just have to like tell you, by the way, all the walls of this dungeon are lined with lead. It doesn't work. Plot reason. And so it's the paradox of
the lead mine, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is we're like the Nabob Brigade or whatever. It's like we're quoting all these reasons of what, like the thing that frustrates me in D&D is like people say we have to stop playing at this level because it gets too powerful, except that now the modern discourse has changed to, well, it just doesn't work. And in which case you have to ask yourself, what's the point of having all of this stuff if it doesn't work? Magic should be able to change things. And that was a conscious design decision when we made like Ironclaw has mind control magic in it because we wanted mind control magic. But we wanted mind control magic to be interesting instead of solving all of the problems. So we have hypnotism, which means you have to take someone aside and do it, not in the middle of a combat. So you can still do it, but you can't do it. You can temporarily blind people in combat, or give them paralysis or spasms, because you can like lesser control and then later work your way up that. But that was a specialty thing that you had to buy. And that also gets into storytelling. Only a few people could do this. Anyone who could do this kind of spell would have to have specific trappings on them. They have specific literacy. It's a narrow field, which informs us of the world, as opposed to what you see in a game like D&D, which is, well, any spellcaster could have done this. I can think of at least 5 different spells that would do this effect. So it doesn't inform me of the world. A wizard did it, and wizards are everywhere.
Wizards are everywhere. And like,
I think the through line for all of this when it comes to design is when you create these things to inform people about what the boundaries of them are and not just leave them blanketly open-ended. You could still have a creative power that ends at a finite point. You could still have the build-up where you have to be an important person to have gotten this big power.
But then that defeats a lot of things of basically 5th edition, which is the power trip, right? That you are playing to become powerful. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
you are shooting to get that spell that can do all this stuff.
Right, but I don't think those are contradictory, having boundaries and yet still being powerful. It's just that you are not all powerful, which, you probably shouldn't be.
I mean, as long as the game gives the as long as the game is giving you tools to handle that additional power level, like giving players the ability to walk through walls is fine, but then if the game also tells you that you should be playing in a dungeon, it doesn't work. The game should tell you how to construct challenges in an abstract way where walking through walls will not instantly solve everything, right? And it doesn't do that. That's where I have a problem.
Yeah, and we're getting away from the paradox here. If we're complaining that magic is too powerful, like you guys have mostly been arguing that it's not because they just nerf it anyway. So why are all of these people saying we have to stop playing D&D at a high level like 7 because it's no fun after 7 because it's not a challenge anymore? I mean, there are people saying this.
I mean, I would argue
it would be right in the thing that they've been presented. After that point, challenges are obviated with magic, and that's what we've covered here. There's no boundary in what you can do. You're now depending on the wizard. Everyone ought to have been a wizard.
Yeah, but with everything we've discussed is how the game's nerfing.
Yeah.
The problem is that I agree with both sides of this argument in a way that I can't reconcile. On the one hand, I do think that players have a tendency to choose, what do we call them, hard rules. They choose the fireballs over the illusions because there's no X factor in the results of that spell. But on the other hand, I also agree that a lot of these higher level non-combat spells, I'm going to call them, can upset the balance and the flow of the game in ways that makes it very difficult. So I don't really know.
What you're having is, I can reconcile that for you, because what you got is the paradox is that you have a party of adventurers, many of whom are spellcasters. So the problem is that while some of them have combat spells, Others have these utility or soft spells. Like, and the problem is like when the 4 to 6 players show up, and they're all, and this gets into the other problem, they're all spellcasters. Like, I want to play a ranger. Turns out I can cast spells, guys.
Yep.
Like they have access to all of these spells, and so that's why they come up. It's also not just there's a wizard in the party and they had to choose to specialize in a kind of fire magic or illusion magic or something like that. No, everyone's got these and they all mix and match. Charm person is in every spellcaster list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, also you can have a situation where you do have a clearly defined spell, but it's even though it's the same level as some others, like a lot of ranger spells is like, yes, you have to first throw arrows in front of you so that you can pick them up and stand there without moving and shoot them at them. So you do X amount of damage. It's like, yeah, but I can do Hunter's Mark. Why would I choose any other spell?
Mm-hmm.
Getting away from that kind of stuff. I mean, like I was saying, as part of magic should be something that's fun and interesting. And I think a lot people have often called wizards glass cannons, which doesn't make any sense because why are they cannons? I thought they were wizards. I thought they were casting spells, not just shooting things. Your archers do that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's the weird paradox of the generic fantasy where magic has become so codified that it's lost any kind of like magical thinking edge to it. We don't think magic missile is my poster child for worst spell ever because it's an evocation of force that only works on living things. It specifically says you can't knock a cup off a table with it because it doesn't attack inanimate objects. It's a force that only works on living things and all it does is damage. It doesn't knock them over or anything, it just does damage.
Cups notoriously not modified by force in any way.
Right. It's this weird nebulous range of don't think, just cast. Whereas magic is it should be magical. It should have, supernatural, it should be side effects. It should have bizarre and arbitrary restrictions on what works to make a little more sense than pseudoscience and the evocation of force. Or something like that. And I think magic could also overcomplicate things. There's so many stories out there, My Little Pony and all sorts of other kinds of stories where trying to inflict mind control on people can, bring out the worst in them or make them too friendly or something like that. Illusion spells could have weird side effects, such as not wearing off when you need them to. I mean, that's the opposite of D&D. It's you can't cast a spell and it doesn't wear off when you need it to. It's D&D, spells disappear at the drop of a hat. You'd be invisible 24/7 if you get away with it. It's instead of making because magic's been codified to be just point at things and blow them up. Like especially Dungeons and Dragons, you point at people and they roll and fall asleep, or instantly become your friend. Whereas you could make this more interesting by saying things like you could cast a spell and ask 3 questions of someone, I could cast a spell and only people who fail the saving throw think I'm invisible and other ones don't. Or with illusions, it could also be that like this would be even more fun, which is you cast a spell on someone and whatever illusion shows up is based on what they're afraid of, not what you're afraid of. Phantasmal Killer is one of the few spells that actually does that, and it's not worded in a way that's any interesting. Those would be spells that would inform you about the world, and they would feel more magical. They would feel less like science, less like I projected energy and it blew up in the room, and more like I, invoked some sort of poetry or soft feeling and it did something. And like the major problem is a lot of games. I know why a lot of games aren't designed this way, because they're written by gamers, the worst people in the world.
I was about to say, like, not a single one of us has a poet's soul here, do we?
No, but I gotta say, I do really like the idea of a curse that the next time you cast a concentration spell, it doesn't dissipate when you want it to, and have a player be stuck invisible for the rest of the session. I think there's something very poetic about that.
No one ever told him it was a curse.
Yes.
So, all right, I'm going to put it on record here. The worst thing about D&D is that there are people will make critical fumble rolls as a house rule to screw fighters, but they'll still do D&D's fancy and magic, used correctly, of I cast a spell and it automatically works and does everything I want. That's works.
You can
It
never
should be
fail
the
a spell roll
opposite.
like that.
It should be stabbing people, should be surefire and reliable, and magic should be random, unpredictable, and untrustworthy. If
And
you
that
want
would be
people to
fun.
die, you kill them with a sword like a normal person.
Agreed. That's why only wild magic sorcerers in my game.
So let's go ahead and do a roundtable question as we get close to winding up and ask. So how would you guys approach the problem of balancing that open-ended, have something fun happen, but still give players the opportunity to say, yes, I have the thing, I can do the thing, please don't nerf my thing, please, oh god, no.
Be clear. We have to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
And
I would... Sorry.
go
Didn't
ahead.
mean to step on either lesson.
No, that's good.
I would say err on the side of making illusion spells effective. If your players invested in them and they want to do something kind of cool, if it's at all possible to even give them like a partial victory for it, I say go for it, because the alternative is to shut them down completely, and then those spells really are worth way less than the mechanical combat spells are.
And Rafferty, what do you think?
You gotta be nice about this.
Yeah, be nice, come on.
Okay.
We believe in you.
The advice I always have is, how do you kill Superman? Which is like, if you're Lex Luthor and you want to, do something to the most powerful person on the planet, you don't get to choose to nerf Superman. And you could do the lame thing and make everything out of kryptonite, which they had to retcon later, like mountains of kryptonite. It's like the two things advice is one of them is, if you had to deal with this kind of world, plan around it. But honestly, my flip side of this is plan to lose. I mean, I think what really just bugs the hell out of me is, like, if this is the stuff that your players can do, then you either ban it outright and say they can't do it at all and tell them in advance in your freaking session 0, or you let it work and let it derail your whole game. But that's the kind of person I am. I personally, like I said, the reason would be nice is I would say, don't play games that let you do this. I mean, that's the biggest, complaint about all of this Dungeons and Dragons stuff, is that none of them are solving the E7 problem. They're not saying we need to revise the magic from the ground up because it causes this problem. They just throw more crap. Here's how to play. You can play a kangaroo person now. They're just
Wait,
throwing
what? Is that a
more
thing?
crap. Yeah,
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
Kangaroo character coming up.
Well, they complained about Eberron. It was Eberron's. If it's they literally said in their mission statement, it's in D&D, it's in Eberron. I wouldn't be bringing up this teleportation complaint if Eberron didn't have teleportation. If they had gotten rid of that, I wouldn't be complaining. But they kept it and threw more crap on the fire. It's if you if it's in there, you have to deal with it. And I guess the last thing is, I miss when players were considered to be exceptional. Like, a big problem you run into, especially with Pathfinder, was the idea that there's a whole bunch of wizards wandering around who do the same thing that you do. Because they built on D&D 3, which was the idea of this. Like, it should be that we didn't build teleport-proof walls because we didn't expect that every adventuring party in the world could teleport. And you should feel special when you show up and say, I'm one of the few people in the world who can do this. And I'm decrying the World of Warcrafting of the world, where, congratulations, you are chosen to save the world. You and the other 5 million people logged on at this moment.
Spend 100 gold to buy all of your spells and have all of your skills ready at all times.
And all of you come back from the dead a number of times. All 5 million of you. Do you know how much that's strained the economy? The funeral industry love.
The uniqueness is, I feel like, a built-in assumption of the underlying fiction that has kind of been forgotten within the context of these games. But you're right. I think that, like, the core conceit going way back is that there's not many wizards about, because if there were, people would walk around shouting, "I disbelieve," so that no one would fall into a concealed pit trap.
See, I could get a job as a professional. I don't believe in anything. I'm just walking around
There you go.
disbelieving things for you all day long.
Oh no, oh my gosh, that's perfect. I want a game where I can go ahead and be a professional critic. I just go around telling everyone they suck.
Wasn't that Eric the Viking? They had a Christian cleric, and so he didn't believe in anything there. So they were Valhalla, and it was like he just walked through, and the gods were like, "Oh, you have to do this." He was like, "I don't believe in any of this."
That's good.
Which ironically didn't work on the island, but wow, that's a deep cut from us.
All right.
Gray hair here. Yeah.
Closing
I mean,
statements.
well, it's also those weird, solutions to stuff. But yeah, no, I mean, back when, like I kept repeating that magic, like even in Jack Vance's world, wizards are incredibly rare. So Vancian magic was something that you could only learn in certain places, and only a few people could pull this off. They wrote stories around it. Like, well, the problem we're getting a lot is D&D is Lankmar mashed with Conan, mashed with Lord of the Rings, mashed with Elric of Melniboné. It's like a pastiche of all these things, and they all cram together, and there's no good oversight and monitoring any of this. And even those people get weird ideas about it. It's like, I mean, we didn't. I don't think our session 0 is going to be up yet, but it was like, the planning of all of this. It's like, I don't know. I would rather. That's why I say my short answer is I would like to see more Dungeons and Dragons games that address this issue by removing these things. It just seems like everyone just takes it for granted that 2/3 of D&D is garbage. Or sorry, I should be more charitable. That 2/3 of D&D is unplayable.
There you go.
Unplayable garbage.
Any last words from you two?
I made my piece.
All right, then I guess my only last comment would be I'd like to go ahead and attach to what Raph said earlier, which is if you're running and you have to interact with these things, just play to lose. Let your players have fun. I swear everything will be better for it.
Why is players winning considered not fun? I've never understood this.
Well, because if you just get them, they won't have fun.
Well,
that's a topic we're going to have to write down, I think.
I blame D&D, especially modern D&D, because you just cast a spell and it just happens. So the mentality is that I just cast Dimension Door and just go through the door. No rolls are necessary, and there's no chance this will fail. And then they do it, and the GM goes, well, there were no rolls involved. That means there was no risk involved. That means this was not a challenge. Mm-hmm. And it's that's unique. I want to point out that is unique to Dungeons and Dragons. So it's that because only D&D works the way I just described.
And I think we'll go ahead and end it off there for now. That's all for today for Notes from the Aleph. And next time we're going to go meet with Rafferty and see how to not have fun. He'll be leading that one. We stream episodes bi-weekly, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can come join us live at twitch.tv/Ractus. We also stream and record weekly tabletop games at the same channel. You can come join us at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sundays and Wednesdays. Norman Rafferty here is a partner and writer for Sanguine Games. Check out sanguinegames.com, join us on the Reddit and Twitter, and be ready for the upcoming book, Ironclaw, Book of Quarrels. Let's see. Don't forget to book RedRabbit over at startplayinggames.com as RedRabbit, and don't forget to go see Lessons over on his channel, Lessons Learned 1, also on YouTube and Twitch. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and come see us all again, everybody. Until next time.